Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwantner and welcome to Selling Power TV. Today we have the pleasure of continuing the conversation with Andris Soltnes and Prabha Singh, that are co-founders and co-chairman of CS Associates. Welcome.
Thank you.
Andy, tell me how sales managers should think about compensation management.
In our discussion yesterday, we have kind of thinking frameworks for how you might want to design compensation plans. So we've articulated 4 decisions that need to be made. The first one has to do with how much should we pay? Where in the marketplace should we be? The second decision that needs to be made is the decision of how much should the incentive be? What should the variable pay be versus the salary? A third decision would be the decision of how many metrics we should use. And a fourth decision is what should the payout curves begin to look like. All of these decisions now organizations probably will make on an annual basis. Our discovery is that maybe 70% of companies are making minor or significant kind of decisions relative to their compensation plans every year. And as part of this now, maybe a good strategy for organizations would be to just do an assessment as to whether the current plan is a good one, evaluate decisions on a regular basis, and then finally, if we make any changes at all, test the decisions in some kind of a simulated fashion.
Right. Prabha, when you look at a compensation plan, there are really 3 constituents. One is, does the sales manager like it? 2, do the salespeople like it? And 3, is it good for the company? How do you find a balance between the 3?
You know, in some way, we think of this as yin and yang, in the sense that you have to get satisfaction from the salesperson, but you need to get traction for the company. And there's tension and harmony between these two. And in assessing a plan, for example, a common mistake is to say that, well, we made our numbers, therefore the plan worked. Or we did not make our numbers, therefore we should change the plan. And I think we need to get just a little bit lower than that to try to understand its impact, as you mentioned, on how the company is doing and what it's doing to the salespeople at the individual sales level.
Andy, when it comes to variable compensation or incentives, what is the rule of thumb? How should you structure that?
Organizations probably are all over the board. You'll have companies, not very many anymore, but they'll be 100% salary. You'll have companies that are 100% commission, and you'll have companies that are in the middle. And we kind of view that there's several things you want to look for. First thing you want to look for is something which we call causality, which basically says, does the salesperson have an impact on the outcome? The second thing that we look for is measurability. So if you can't measure it, then certainly you shouldn't pay on it. So in some tough situations where there might be a channel distribution where the measurement gets lost in a channel, or if you have team selling, these become harder situations for us to use incentives. A third thing that could be mentioned also is kind of the goals of the organization and the culture. There's some organizations that have forever felt that incentives have really worked and it's become part of the genes. And other organizations, you'll see kind of a migration.
Right.
For example, in medical devices, more and more, there's a migration that's gone from very highly incentivized plans to more moderate kind of plans over time, because incentive plans can, on occasion, drive unwanted behavior. People just may oversell. They may
game the system.
They'll game the system. They may take their relationships to another company. And
Prabha, when it comes to administration, a lot of companies rely on spreadsheets. Compensation plans may be a little confusing, though the payout is late, and then there's dispute between the salesperson and the manager. How can you avoid that?
In some way, the scale and complexity of a compensation plan. When I say complexity, I'm not talking about an individual plan, but suppose there are 100 sales roles in a company. Then we're getting into a very complex administration situation. And then there are other cases where they're very simple. So somehow the complexity of the situation has to match the kind of tools or resources you bring to administering a plan. And for example, at ZS, we have a suite of tools which help companies administer their plans and make sure that the payouts are on time. So tools like the ones we have are very useful when the scale is large.
So that's a technology tool?
That's a technology tool. It's a software product, and other companies have it too.
That allow you to model?
Well, it allows you to, of course, do the what-ifs when you're designing the plan, but also once the plan is in place, how do you make sure that the payouts are calculated accurately on time? There are processes, for example, for making adjustments, for determining eligibility, and so on and so forth. And also, most importantly, giving you some metrics on an ongoing basis to see how your plan is doing before it becomes too late.
Andy, if a sales manager wants some quick information and to learn a lot in a short time about compensation, what do you recommend?
Well, they read the chapter in our book. It's probably the longest chapter. I think that the compensation problem is one of the most difficult ones that we face in Salesforce management.
Did you write a separate book on compensation management?
Yes, we have. We have a longer book. In fact, we've written 4 books. The first book was a kind of a primer on Salesforce effectiveness. The second one drilled in on Salesforce design. The third one was compensation. And the compensation book is our longest book. It also talks about how you design a plan, how you administer the plans. It talks about how you would test to see if a plan works or not. And most importantly, it talks about how you would implement a change in plan.
So, wanted to add one thing, that in the environment today, there is one question that we get a lot when it comes to a compensation plan. And it's also leading to a change in behavior. And that is that most people are not making their numbers. So then they're saying, what should we do with the plan? Should we change it or should we just gut it out? And our recommendation actually is to change it. And a new mindset is emerging, which is the old mindset was, the higher the quota I can shove down to my sales organization, the more sales will be. And people are suddenly realizing that that's absolutely not true. That the best quota is the realistic quota, not the largest quota.
So if you're wondering how you can build the winning sales force and master compensation, get this book. I want to thank you, Andy, for sharing the information. Thank you, Prabha.
Thank you.